Actually, all homes in those times have Beatles records. All, believe me. Of course, when I became the melody director, I produced many hundred thousands albums of Beatles. People have right to have it, to use it, to listen. I support not copyright, but copyleft. Because I'm sure that in Russia we should support musical piracy, because musical piracy was the key to have freedom in Russia, to have free information.
Andrei Tropilo confirmed his place in Soviet Beatles mythology by inserting his face into the iconic Sgt. Pepper album sleeve. As Beatles music became more available in the 1970s, Beatles style began to obsess a generation, 10 years after it had faded in the West.
They influenced everything. They influenced our music, they influenced our life, our way of living, our dress, how we dress. They influenced everything, actually.
All the hairstyles, you know, cowboy boots and everything. So it was like an amazing power, because all the youngsters, all young people, they started to imitate. They started to feel more free.
What was available, a bad quality photos of the Beatles, God knows taken from where, from which album or cover or newspaper and so on. And you can buy this picture for 50 kopecks. And it was a choice, either to have a breakfast or to buy this Beatles picture. They wouldn't be able to buy any kind of clothes in Soviet shops. And just with some imagination and a pair of scissors, we would turn an ordinary school jacket into a collarless Beatles jacket.
And of course, Lennon's glasses. Lennon's glasses is just fashion, just all 22 square million kilometers of Soviet Union, Lennon glasses.
There were several specially trained guys who would be transforming army boots, real army boots, very heavy and ugly and so on, into some kind of elegant Beatles style.
Each and every person who had a guitar and mopped up hairstyle was a Russian Beatle. I was. I was skinny, huge hair, guitar. Paul McCartney, playing bass.
I spent like 2 or 3 hours just trying to stretch my hairs and made myself a haircut to make myself look like Beatles. So not only the boys were copying the Beatles hairstyle, but the girls as well.
So it was like a fairy tale, and lots of people just having a glimpse, a small window out from the West.
By the early 1980s, the gap between the Beatles generation and their geriatric leaders had become unbridgeable. As the huge country stagnated, millions of young people defected into their own world.
If we talk about the historical impact of the Beatles, they have alienated a whole generation of young, well-educated, urban Soviet kids from their communist motherland. They wanted to live in an alternative world, consuming alternative culture, pursuing alternative lifestyle. You are a stranger in your own country. You can live behind the Iron Curtain. You can pretend to be a young communist, but at the same time, you can be someone totally different.
Liberated by the Beatles, Soviet rock confronted the system. Victor Tsoi's song, Changes, became an anthem for the early 80s. In March 1985, Mikhail Gorbachev became the Soviet leader. The man who would be called the USSR's first rock and roll president.
I always like to quote the words said by Mikhail Gorbachev. Quote, "I do believe the music of the Beatles has taught the young generation of the Soviet Union that there is another life, there is freedom somewhere. And of course this feeling has pushed them towards perestroika, towards the dialogue with the outside world."
In the heady days of the late 80s, even Josif Kobzon, for decades the official voice of patriotic socialism, sang Beatles hits. As the Berlin Wall was torn down in November 1989, triggering revolutions across the Soviet Union, the communist empire began to collapse.
You can smell that the communism already gone in the Baltic countries, and it's on last legs in Moscow, Belarus, and Ukraine. So they say, let's do something interesting for kids, finally. And what would be interesting? Beatles. Well, okay, let's make a program.
With the help of a school friend who was now working in TV, Yuri recorded the first ever program about the Beatles. He persuaded a Beatles fanatic, Vladimir Savitsky, to share the responsibility.
And it was really a surprise for everyone that it was possible. We were so inspired by this opportunity to talk at last about this music.
But in the chaos surrounding the collapse of communism, fearful TV bosses wiped the tape before it could be shown. Yuri's friend smuggled a copy to him, and 30 Minutes with the Beatles was finally broadcast across the Soviet Union. By then, Yuri had given up on his home country and stowed away on a ship to Canada to start a new life. Since the ending of communism and the collapse of the USSR, the Beatles generation have become granddads and babushkas. The consummation of the 40-year love affair came on May 24, 2003, in Red Square. Across the republics of the former Soviet Union, back in the USSR, is an enduring anthem. For the people who were there when Paul McCartney brought the Beatles music to Red Square, the memory of that night stays with them.
It was actually like a huge religious ceremony.
Back in USSR.
It was like a real holy day.
Is it a reality or not? Or we are happy that we lived to the time when it became possible?
Back in USSR.